welcome to the Spine in Liverpool, and welcome to our first IBIC, our Industrial Biotechnology Innovation Catalyst Conference. I have to say, I was thinking back, it's 13 months since we launched IBIC in Manchester, and I can't believe how quickly the last 12 months, 13 months have flown by. And that's always a sign of a good time and hopefully a good initiative. It's fantastic to see so many people here today, and I have to keep turning my head to talk to you all. And it's great to see a mix of people here. We have got university partners from across our partner institutions, Manchester, Liverpool John Moores, Salford and Manchester Metropolitan Universities. We've got our Civic partners from Manchester and Liverpool regions. And we also have academics and students here today. So we've got a great geographical and age distribution range here today. I'm not going to say which range I'm contributing to as we're going along. But really thrilled that everybody is here today. So just before I hand on, we've got a few just housekeeping issues. Don't worry about reading through these. Effectively, the key things, there is no fire alarm scheduled today, but if the fire alarm does go off, if you go out past the lifts, there's 2 fire exits there, just head down the stairs, and the congregation area is out the front door on the park area opposite. Hopefully we won't need that. We have toilets in behind the lifts. We have the internet, probably the most important one on this list. It's free Wi-Fi, and the password is RCP-Mobile Connect. If you're in a doubt of that, please just ask anyone with a Ask Me badge on from the IBIC team. We can help you with that. First aid, anyone needing first aid, please come and contact the IBIC team. You've met them as you come through the foyer this morning. Anyone needs a prayer room, come and ask us. We've got facilities available. And really, my job is just to say enjoy. We've got a packed programme today representing of our Industrial Biotech Innovation Catalyst community. We're going to hear from academics, from policymakers, from our funders, EPSRC and other funders across the UKRI and wider landscape. We're going to hear from industrial partners, some of whom we've supported, some of whom we're about to support, and some of whom we hope to support as we go through, and really catalyse the growth of our region, as in the Northwest region. We're very proud that we're Manchester, Liverpool, Cheshire, Northwest, working together, building that Northern Arc as we look to head towards innovation and economic growth, which you'll hear more about this morning. So without any further ado, I'm delighted that we have Steve Rotheram here today, who's going to say a few words of welcome to you. Steve, of course, is the Mayor of Liverpool City Region. Steve.
Thanks, Aline. Liverpool and Manchester coming together. Just imagine what we could do if we put aside some of the tribal rivalries and jokes about your weather in Manchester. I won't do any today, but that's the sun outside, just in case you haven't seen it for a while. I know it's to split an audience straight away, don't it? If you are from Manchester or elsewhere, genuinely welcome to Liverpool. Welcome to the UK's cultural capital. Hopefully, in the couple of days that you are here, you'll find your way into going to some of the bars and restaurants, because it'd be nice if Manchester helped the Liverpool economy the way that we do with the co-op economy in Manchester, because there's a lot of things that happen there now, and you get loads and loads of Scousers, including a certain Scouser called Paul McCartney, who played in Greater Manchester. 22,000 people every single night, more than half of them coming up the motorway. So it's good to reverse that fortune. It is a pleasure, though, to welcome you all here to the Industrial Biotechnology Innovation Catalyst Conference. That's the last time I'll be saying that mouthful and full, I tell you. Can't you think of something more snappy? IBIC is called, isn't it? The IBIC. And a huge thanks to Professor Miller, Professor Richard Jones, and the whole team for choosing to kick off your 2-day gathering here. Now, if you'd asked me, you couldn't have picked a better place for your conference. And you might think, well, he would say that, wouldn't he? But Liverpool has been a city of makers, from its historic role in global trade and shipping to plastic manufacturers in the 20th century. I've just been talking actually to Professor Jones, and I said it'd be fitting, wouldn't it, if we were to discover an alternative to the biohazard that microplastics have become. Wouldn't it be great if that was part of what comes out of your work? It really would be world-changing and would obviously improve the ecology of our rivers, one of them just out there, as you know. I say there's no better place because innovation is stitched into the very fabric of our place and our people. And industrial biotechnology is a perfect match with that story. So for me, IBIC represents the partnership. It's a £5 million partnership between our universities in Liverpool and Manchester with industrial heavyweights like Unilever and Croda. And its goal is simple: to catalyse, as Aline said, the Northwest bioeconomy by accelerating knowledge exchange, skills and real-world impact. And that word, catalyst, is doing a lot of heavy lifting in this, because when you look at the figures, you start to see the scale of the opportunity. It's a global market projected to be worth £2.7 trillion by 2030, growing at 13% a year. So if you put that simply, the bioeconomy isn't a nice to have, it has to be a must have if we're serious about hitting our net zero carbon targets, decarbonisation industry, and creating good quality future-proof jobs. IBIC is also a shining example of the Northern Arc, again mentioned by Aline, but that's something that myself and Andy Burnham have been banging on about for the last few years, because by pooling our distinctive strengths across the whole of the Northwest, that includes places outside of Liverpool and Manchester as well, but the wider north, we can punch well above our weight on the national and international stage. And the closer partnership announced last November between the universities of Liverpool and Manchester shows that academia is every bit as committed to that vision as civic leaders and businesses are. Here in the Liverpool City Region, we're aiming to invest 5% of our GVA in research and development by the end of the decade, and that's a target that could add £20 billion to the economy and create 44,000 jobs. And it's a massive target for us. If you have a look at governments are talking about 2.6, 2.7% in R&D. We're talking about doubling what that is, because for me, innovation is the golden thread that runs through everything. We've got this local growth plan, same as Greater Manchester have in other areas. But within that, we've got two things, which are our free port and what Manchester call an innovation zone, an investment zone, and what we call an innovation zone. So we're pulling those things together, and that gives us huge advantages when we're attracting FDI into the area. When it comes to engineering biology, we've got world-class assets at our fingertips. So take the Elanco fermentation campus and speak, one of only a handful of sites worldwide with that level of capability. We've got the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, of course, and they've got something called a BRIGHT programme, plugging the critical gaps in biologic, yeah? Is that a word, is it? All right, okay. See, I'm not a chemist by trade, I'm a bricklayer, so... but biologics pipeline and the prospect of commercial scale manufacturing on the former Tri-RX site. So really very exciting prospects for that to be used for the similar sort of thing in life sciences that it was originally built for. But if you lay it on top of that, our strengths in material chemistry and infection prevention, disease and control, maritime decarbonisation, and then add to that something that I'm hoping tomorrow there might be an announcement on, which is the world's largest tidal power project. But then you start to see why we say that the Liverpool City Region is an ideal test bed for government and for industry investment. And of course, shiny kit on its own won't deliver the goods. You know, if we get a tidal project, brilliant, but what then? So IBIC's ambition is to do more about leaving a legacy, so training more students, 200 more students, backing 25 scale-ups and supporting 80 industry academic projects by 2028. So it shows that we're serious about building a talent pipeline that's rooted in this place and open to everyone. We have to give more students the aspiration that they can stay here when they graduate, and creating those jobs actually does that by creating the ecosystem necessary for them to want to stay here. So if there is one thing that I want to leave you with, it is an ask over the next couple of days, and I think it's quite simple. So I know that you're being bold, but that collaboration needs to be mission driven. We have to start looking at what we can get out of all of your hard work and turn that and commercialise it into things that will grow the economy locally. And that means that whether you're a researcher, a business, an entrepreneur, an investor, an academic, or a policymaker, we need your ideas and your energy to unlock the full potential of industry biotechnology. And if we get it right, we won't just be developing new enzymes or feedstocks. We'll be creating a fairer, healthier, greener world for everyone. And I think that's a prize well worth paying the price for. So thank you for being here. Enjoy your couple of days here in Liverpool. Thank you for the work that you're doing to build a more sustainable future. I hope you enjoy your conference, our city. And if you get a chance, try a proper Scouse pie. Thanks a lot.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And there's your rallying call to do better together and also have a good pie at the same time. So I'm just going to take 2 minutes just to introduce our IBIC programme, and I'll tell you a little bit about what we have done over the past 13 months or so. So as I said at the beginning, so we are a collaborative network that is funded through the EPSRC, Place-Based Impact Acceleration Account programme, and Andrew's here who will talk a little bit more about that as we go through. But what I wanted to do was just kind of tell you a little bit about the activities and some of the achievements that we've done. So our mission, as Steve mentioned, we are mission driven, is to really supercharge the growth of the Northwest bioeconomy. And that is to bring each of our pieces of our jigsaw together in terms of policy, academic, industry, scale-up, investment together. So we're greater than the sum of all our individual parts to really help grow the bioeconomy, get the research that we do in the universities out into the real world to deliver that impact, and then longer term deliver that economic growth in terms of job creation and increasing productivity, etc., within our whole Northwest region. So what we said that we would do is build our activity on 4 pillars, so 4 pillars of building the bioeconomy. So one is about building partnership, the second is about knowledge exchange, so getting that, increasing the porosity between sort of the academic institutions and the industrial partners, and delivering that real world impact, and not just giving money to grease the wheels, but actually holding people's hands to help them on that journey, whether that be through partnership with a company for knowledge exchange, or whether that be taking your idea, developing and founding a startup company, or building a spin-out company, of course, dependent on building the IP portfolio. And not just helping that company found, but once it's found, where does it go? Where does it get investment? Where does it find the infrastructure to be able to build the pilot scale, but also then grow that pilot scale into full-scale manufacturing processes. And last but not least, our fourth pillar is building the skills. And that's building the workforce of tomorrow, but it's also upskilling the current workforce, whether that be at the operator level or at the C-suite level, to really help build the whole concept and really get engineering biology or industrial biotechnology into our manufacturing base across the whole of our Northwest region. So here we've got some just sort of first year achievements and figures, and I should say, 13 months since our launch, but the team hasn't been in place, or the team was only in place from July last year. So these are just some of the statistics that we have pulled together. I hope you see that we've got some good numbers on here, and that these are just the start. We're actually looking to be able to build and grow these out over the next 3 years of our IBIC programme, and we're already starting to think, as many of you know, how we build on what IBIC has done to then grow, so we create IBIC 2 or the scale-on version. So what we have done, we have created community building. We have held several events, 17 events over the past 12 months. We've reached over 1,000 or 1,200 delegates, 1,200 different people across our region, and brought them together to talk to each other, network and build connections. We have gone out and attended 21 different events in our region, but also extending out our region so we can build and raise our profile externally, but also so we can bring expertise back into our region as well. We create monthly webinars, so if anybody wants to give a webinar, share their technology, share their research, please let the team know. We're always on the lookout for more ideas to expand the activities we do. First Thursday of every month we have our webinar. If you want to check them out, they're all on YouTube, so we have a YouTube channel, and we're increasing views as we go through. We have money to help, as I said, grease those wheels, to help build those connections. We have funded 24, we've had 24 applications, projects we've funded 22. So if the academics amongst you, super high success rate. And that's because we help people as they pull the applications together. So we've got really good connections in building those impact projects that are coming through our pipeline. These are all looked at and refereed by internal and external funding panels to make sure that the quality is there and we are going to be delivering the impact. It's not for basic R&D, it's about getting that next step, getting that knowledge out there, getting the impact created across various types of fields. We have awarded so far 400k of funding. We've leveraged 220 from our industrial partners, and we've built 23 new relationships. If you haven't connected and got some funding through us, please consider doing that. Build the network, make connections, talk to people that you don't know, come up with their ideas over these 2 days. The next funding deadline is the 19th of June, and then we'll be rolling that forward to have, I think, the 9th or so of September as the second one. Every 3 months we've got funding calls coming forward. We've also done lots of competitions. So this is thinking about creating the commercial impact of the research that we do. So we've been focusing on startup spin-out competitions to get those ideas out there. I see several of our award winners in the audience today, which is great. So we've helped run, we've either run or co-run 5 competitions, awarded 6 to 8k in Innovation Awards, which is really just Kickstarter awards, and directed these guys onto accelerator programs across our region to help them build and get their articulate their value proposition, get their pitch deck ready, and some have already gone out and got some funding. Trained 175 ECRs, some in entrepreneurship, some in industrial biotechnology skills, from fundamental biotech through to scale-up biotech. Some of these competitions have led to 3 companies incorporated over the last few months alone, and we've also been heavily involved in sort of influencing activities, whether that be talking and going to Parliament dinners or policy articles, and trying to help influence the policy and the regulatory environment to really enable our startups, our spin-outs, our SMEs, our corporates to grow and thrive and adopt biotechnology into their manufacturing processes. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to hand over to Richard Jones. I'm very pleased that we've got an excellent lineup of speakers across the 2 days, but very pleased that we have a targeted session this morning focusing on regional engagement and innovation in place. I'll share these slides afterwards, don't worry. But what we are looking to do, I think it's really timely, this discussion, this particular session, given the announcements from government over the weekend in terms of innovation and sort of economic investment into our regions. And I'm sure we'll hear more about that from Richard and also Andrew this morning. So without any further ado, I'm going to ask Richard to come and join us. So Richard is the Vice President for Regional Innovation and Civic Engagement in the university, and you will probably also know Richard as one of our national figures in terms of helping influence funding innovation in place. So Richard, I'll hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Aline. It's a real pleasure to be here. It's a real pleasure to be here, and as Aline says, this is a very timely moment to be talking about place-based innovation. And my talk here is actually going to be quite a kind of political talk in a small p, in the sense that I want to explain a little bit about why place-based innovation is so important, and fundamentally why IBIC was a really good thing, and we ought to have more like it. So I'm going to start, it's a really important moment for us. We've got a comprehensive spending review coming out tomorrow. We've got, we had the science settlement announced on Sunday, and, significantly that science announcement had, it really led on this idea of place-based growth, place-based innovation. So I think that I want to start with one of my both favourite and least favourite graphs. This graph, I think, tells you pretty much everything about what's wrong with the British economy and why that, what's wrong with the with British politics too. So productivity, output per hour, the amount of economic output that an hour's labour produces, grew at about 2.1% per year. From, in fact, before 1970, it's pretty much a complete post-war trend, totally solidly. And so, people my age remember, the 70s seemed terrible in terms of the economic performance. There'd been recessions, but that graph just marched up and up and up, and and that kind of framed the whole of the way that politics and economics could be dealt with. And that changed in the mid-2000s. So around the time of the financial crisis, and there's an interesting discussion about whether the financial crisis was cause or effect, but after that, that productivity stopped growing, and it's slipped down this new low equilibrium of something like 0.5% growth a year. So broadly speaking, that means that we're about 27% worse off now than we would have been if that trend had continued. And I think that fact pretty much underlies everything that's difficult about politics at the moment. It's why the government's in a fiscal mess. It's why I think politics is, there's kind of an element of soundness about it. But of course, when I talk about that, productivity seems very abstract. GDP is something that people find very difficult to get their heads around, but it really matters. And this is why it really matters. That's a graph of average real weekly wages corrected for inflation, again since 1970, and you can see the pattern exactly matches, more or less, a few more bumps. Actually, it's a little bit, growth in wages was slightly higher. But the point is that abstract thing about productivity not growing directly translates into people's living standards. So it translates into people's wages, then translates into taxes. That's why the government can't afford to fund public services in the way that people have come to expect. So our productivity problem is really central to the problems that the UK faces. Now, there's some interesting dimensions to the productivity problem, and since I'm in, we're talking about Liverpool, Manchester project, The UK has another strange economic problem, which is that its second-tier cities don't drive the economy. In most European countries, the second-tier cities, Frankfurt, Milan, Lyon, they're places that drive their nation's economy. But in the UK, our second-tier cities in the UK, so Manchester, Liverpool, Birmingham, Glasgow, they're actually lower than the national average. So that plot there, which I've pinched from my collaborator Tom Forth, shows you how big the gap is. So that's productivities ranked for a whole bunch of European cities. And you'll see London very near the top, Manchester and Liverpool right at the bottom of that European league. And that's something that's really unusual. And, you know, the cities that have comparable productivities to Manchester and Liverpool are Palermo in Sicily, Leipzig in the former East Germany. So outside the southeast, the UK has an economy which is not like a Northern European economy. It's more like a Southern European economy, or an economy that's only just emerged from communism. And if you look at where those other cities are, Milan, Dusseldorf, Lyon, they're much higher. So if our second cities, if Manchester and Liverpool were able to operate at the same level as what you'd think of as comparable European cities, the whole country would be, a huge chunk of our productivity problem would go away. Now, if we look in detail, we can look, down at our cities themselves. Here's where GM and Liverpool City Region are. So what you see is that actually there is no borough in Greater Manchester that has a productivity higher than the UK average. The only borough in Liverpool City Region that has a productivity higher than average is actually Holton, which is on the other side of the Mersey, and uncoincidentally is a great concentration of the chemical industry. So we have a situation where in the northwest where our cities, not only do our cities underperform the national average, you've got real outliers there. And so if when Steve Rotheram or Andy Burnham is thinking about their own city, you've got places like Rochdale, Oldham, St Helens that are really not just a little bit lower than average, that are really, really struggling. So this is why productivity is so important. Okay, so what is productivity and what isn't it? Productivity is not about individuals working harder. What productivity is about is having a higher value of goods and services for every hour of work that you put in. And where productivity growth comes from capital investment, better organisation, new technologies, skilled workers. Fundamentally, it comes from innovation. And so that's really why we're here. We're here to promote innovation, and that promoting innovation, that will lead to the productivity growth that will help Steve and Andy fund the public services they want to do. It'll help the citizens of our cities, have the kind of lives that they want to have. Innovation is something that we talk about a lot, and I think it's worth, it's a kind of term of art that we just use all the time. And if you ever go and talk to lay people, if you talk to counsellors, if you talk to people who aren't in our world, actually it's quite a difficult thing it doesn't sound very concrete. So I think it's worth just pulling apart. What do we mean by innovation? What is it? And here's just a few examples I've just picked out that are fairly, that I think illustrate the point. So the simplest example, here's one example. There's a drug called Lynparza. It's close to my heart because the research for this was done in the University of Sheffield, which is where I was before I was at Manchester. So this, in a way, is what you might think of as the classical picture. You invent something in university, you commercialise it, it goes out into the market and makes money. And it really does make money. It's got projected sales of about 4 billion in 2028. It's a drug for advanced ovarian cancer, so many people will be enormously grateful to have this drug. Say it treats ovarian cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer. So that's the kind of the classic example: university invention taken out, commercialised, and that process is a long time. That research was done in the early 2000s in the University of Sheffield, and it's only been on the market a few years. But I want to stress that's actually quite a special case. That's not how most innovation happens. Here's another example, which I love so much because I like the science. I teach soft matter physics sometimes, so Dove 2-in-1 shampoo. Lots of innovation is about putting together existing things in new ways. Of course, Dove's a Unilever product, so that's important for this region. And it's one of those things, you know, it just seems everybody knows you get 2-in-1 shampoo, but you have to stop and think about it for a moment. How can I have a shampoo that both takes off dirt and puts on something? It's really subtle. There's a really beautiful piece of soft matter physics underlying there about dilution triggers. It was a really neat piece of work. So, you know, our friends in Unilever are making great products, great new products that, you know, make people's lives better just by putting together existing things in new ways. And then my third example is, I'm glad I chose a Holiferm pilot plant since they're speaking after me, but you know, improving processes for making existing products or services. And that's what, you know, a lot of what we're going to be talking about is how can we make the chemical industry greener? How can we get new, you know, improved surfactants by using biological routes? How can we make the processes better? So lots of that, you know, it's not really seen, you know, the general public doesn't see that. It's about how do you change processes. So that's I think, three ways of thinking about innovation. Now, what's the role? I want to talk a little bit about the role of the public sector and the private sector in supporting innovation. What we know is that public sector R&D supports the productivity boosting private sector R&D, but it's not optimally distributed. Now, this is where we get to the place bit. So, you know, all those products were brought to market by companies. They're brought to market by the private sector, doing R&D on to create the new products, to optimize the processes by which they were produced. And even economists know that the private sector left to itself won't invest enough in R&D because it can't get all it can't capture all the benefits. So the public sector, even the Treasury knows that the public sector has to support the innovation process. We have to produce the skilled people in universities. We do fundamental research. We produce work that can be made into spin-outs. We can work in collaboration with industry to support those productivity-driving improvements. But if we look at where public sector R&D and private sector R&D is distributed across the country, you see that there's rather an interesting and, in my view, rather suboptimal pattern. So this plot shows you, on the x-axis we've got the public R&D, and on the y-axis we've got the business R&D. And I think this is actually quite an illuminating plot. So Tom Forth and I wrote a report about this 5 years ago, and this is actually an updated version of that with the latest data. Let's look at it. Here's the east of England. What's going on in the east of England? You've got really quite a lot of public sector research. It's quite far out on the right-hand axis, so the government is putting a lot of money into Cambridge, essentially. But what that's done is it's driven a really strong private sector innovation economy. So that's essentially what you want to have. Cambridge is basically a model. Yes, you shove loads of public sector money in, but the private sector responds. London, on the other hand, you've actually got very high public sector R&D support in London, but the private sector R&D is not actually that much. You know, you could ask the question, are we actually getting all the value for money for that public sector R&D in London? That's an argument, of course, I wouldn't want to go too far down because I want people still to speak to me. But it's a question that arises if you look at this graph. Where are we in the northwest? Where we are is somewhere quite interesting. We've got quite high private sector R&D, but the government isn't supported it enough. So the public sector R&D is not enough for the scale of our private sector R&D base. So our argument is that we've got productivity growth opportunities that are being missed. The market's giving us signals. It's saying, you know, invest money in innovation in our region, and the private sector will more than match that. So that, I think, is a huge argument for why we need to have more innovation funding in the Northwest. So we have seen, I think, a big change about a real growing understanding of the importance of place in innovation funding. We see it, EPSRC, you know, we're here exactly for that reason. The EPSRC has recognised this, introduced place-based innovation accelerator accounts, and so I think we see that. We saw an announcement of the Local Innovation Partnership Fund at the weekend. So what do you think? What do I think we need to do? I think the focus has to be on raising regional productivity. That's why, you know, that's why we can get Steve Rotheram in this room saying this is what's important for my region. It's going to raise the living standards of the people that he represents. So I think, you know, that focus on productivity is really important. It's got to focus on existing industry clusters. It's got to look at what the strengths of the region already are, and it's got to support regional industrial strategies where cities look at what their economies look like. Cities have can understand their economy much better than people in Whitehall or Swindon can. And where industry clusters cross political boundaries, then places must collaborate. So, you know, it's no good just drawing rings around individual cities and saying, well, you know, sorry, you're outside the political boundary of Greater Manchester, you can't get involved. And the goal should be to raise private sector R&D. And how do you do that? You support existing businesses that want to innovate, you promote startups and spin-outs, and you support them to scale up in your region. And here's a map. This is from the DCIT's cluster map, which shows you this was the DCIT's attempt to locate where innovative industry was. And I've pointed the layers that are stressed here are chemicals and materials, bioscience and life sciences. And you can see that giant blob of stuff round the northwest, Liverpool, Greater Manchester, Cheshire. So that's why we're here. So, in conclusion, IBIC, I think it's a collaborative, place-based initiative that supports an important emerging industrial technology, bio-based technology, engineering biology. Its natural home is in this region. So I think it's a fantastic example of what we mean by place-based innovation. So I'm enormously grateful to Aline and colleagues in both Liverpool and Manchester for getting us to this point in the journey, to EPSRC for funding it, for our city regions, for both Liverpool City Region and Greater Manchester for supporting it, for all the institutions that are represented, the universities, and particularly the businesses. I think it's a great initiative. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Richard. I think we have time for one question. Yeah.
Hey, thanks for a great talk. That's a really sort of interesting take on the productivity versus location. And I think one of the things that's really interesting is how Manchester and Liverpool do sit so far down compared to the other European cities when there's so much potential in the northwest. Then showing Cambridge as a really great model example. Where does Cambridge sit sort of on that productivity scale? Can you say that there's a real direct correlation with that injection of public and private sector funding into the productivity?
Yeah, well, that's a really interesting question. I mean, you know, why have Liverpool and Manchester gone so low? I think It's because, you know, they had great post-war industry bases that were allowed to decay, and there's, you know, interesting political and economic arguments about that. You know, one of the things that I constantly say about Manchester is that people think, oh, Manchester, it's a cotton town, the cotton industry died in the 20s, what do you expect? But that's not, in fact, true. The economy of Manchester in the 50s and 60s and 70s was very much driven on high, you know, advanced manufacturing, aerospace, you know, Avro, Ferranti, Metro Vickers. You know, I was just talking to the first the circuits and the first BBC micros are actually made in Oldham, which is a fact that not many people know. Those industries didn't make it through the deindustrialization of the 90s and 2000s, and we haven't recovered from that. The case of Cambridge is a really interesting one because Cambridge is a fantastic innovation economy, but it's a tiny place. You know, so you know, the population of Greater Manchester is nearly 3 million or so. The population of Cambridge, even if I'm being generous about its surrounding villages, is about 250,000. So there's an order of magnitude difference between them. So again, an argument, you know, I think there's a really important argument for us here that what we can do in the northwest is, you know, you want to build a factory in Cambridge, it's not going to happen. So we can, we genuinely can scale businesses in a way that can't happen there.
Very quickly.
So, mentioned some of these European countries. I went to a meeting in Dusseldorf where we were given a talk by the Minister of Science for North Rhine-Westphalia. That's like saying it's the Minister of Science for Yorkshire. Why don't we have one for the Northwest?
Yeah, good question. Good question. I think that's exactly the capacity we should be building up. You know, and as I say, it's great. I think I'm just. It's so good that we had Steve come and talk to us, because I think 10 years ago you would not have got a regional leader thinking innovation was important. So we've made big progress there, and I think, yeah, that's the next stage, is to have you know, subnational government that's really serious about innovation and science. Great. Okay.
Brilliant. Let's thank Richard once again. Brilliant, thank you very much. And I know there's going to be time for questions over coffee and lunch later. So we heard about the relationship between private and public sectors funding. So I'm very pleased that we've got Andrew Bourne here today. So Andrew is the Executive Director of Innovation and Partnerships at EPSRC. So you'll hear from our sponsor. Thank you very much. Andrew, over to you.
Thank you, Aline, and for the invitation to come and talk this morning. Good morning, everybody. Reflections on Richard's talk, if only Manchester had the sunshine of Pereira, is the kind of the thought that springs to mind. So I'm going to talk this morning a bit about what EPSRC does as a funder, and how place is becoming more and more important to us as an organisation, not only within EPSRC, but as UK research and innovation. So when I was coming up to Liverpool yesterday, you know, place I think has a very important pull, and very personal for anybody. And my kind of connection with Liverpool is my aunt, and she used to work and live in Liverpool, and she was really passionate about Liverpool Philharmonic Orchestra, and she used to follow their performances locally, globally. And I think it's a really good example of something that doesn't exist in every major city around the UK, but has such an international reputation. And I think very much that's what, you know, what place is about unlocking that kind of activity in a particular region or cluster and kind of making it have a real significant footprint. And I'm pleased to say that not funded by EPSRC but by AHRC, Arts Humanities Research Council, they've received £6.75 million to build a creative cluster around that kind of around that area, and with Liverpool at John Moores University. So a really good example. So what's that got to do with IBIC? Well, you know, I think when I took over this role and I started kind of thinking about place, We've long supported research as a national funder around the whole of the UK, and it's important to recognise that EPSRC, with its competitive processes, and often gets some bad press, and I'm really grateful to Richard and all the support that he's given to EPSRC over many years and as a previous council member. By working with businesses and partners, actually, I think EPSRC's distribution of funding is not too bad. I think it's around 65% of it is outside the Golden Triangle, so a very kind of fair reflection of the different institutes, the different infrastructures and the different expertise that exists around the UK. And EPSRC has long supported the biotech industry with our support for chemistry, for chemical biology, manufacturing, kind of green scale up. So really pleased to see the continuing success of this region. And what we've been thinking about over the last sort of few years is about how we can get more kind of outcome focused. So not thinking about where the pound notes go in, but actually where the impact comes out. And I think that's probably key to the success. So let's say a few things. So it's not just EPSRC that does place, hold the card flag for UK research innovation. We have institutes that are funded in Daresbury, Rutherford. We've got the Royce Institute that EPSRC funds in Manchester, and there are other institutes as well funded by other research councils. But EPSRC has, this is our kind of overview for last year. We have about £1 billion to invest in research and training. And I've kind of clustered it around sort of 5 areas on this slide. I think the key thing that we spend a lot of our money supporting is on people. That's a key part of what a successful economy is driven by. It's challenging because we'd like to support more people. I think the number of doctoral students that we have supported is gradually diminishing as our budgets are not keeping pace with inflation. But there's still kind of just shy of 10,000 students that we support as a population. A lot of other investigators we support on grants through early career researchers, technical professionals as well, and fellowships. So I think that gives a flavour of the kind of volume of talent that we support across the whole of the UK. Just reinforcing on the right hand of the slide the kind of where our money is distributed. So we do support 120 different institutions around the UK. Now, there is a concentration around some of our higher performing universities, but I think it just shows that what's possible. And a lot of that is probably, that diversity is probably through our PhD training. But nevertheless, it shows that we have connectivity with many institutions around the UK. And it's not just national, we're international, so you can see also on those 3,000 awards, a third have got international project partners on, so very much are connected to a global portfolio. We don't fund institutes necessarily in the same way as STFC in terms of large infrastructure institutes, but we've got 4 critical institutes that we now support as an organisation, and again they're distributed in various parts of the UK. Already mentioned Royce and focusing on materials. We support the Rosalind Franklin Institute at RAU, which focuses on life sciences, and there is also the National Quantum Computing Centre and the Turing Institute supporting our work on AI. So going to the left-hand side of the bottom left on the figure, we've got significant partnering and co-creation, and I think this is what it's all about in terms of why people are here. So we've got a significant number of active project partners, and I think they are key to unlocking much of the research that has value to the economy and significant co-investment. And that's not just pound notes, but that's also in-kind access to facilities and general support. And on the right-hand side, in terms of government, which is sort of really excited about critical technologies at the moment, I think EPSRC, along with other councils, plays a significant role in the areas that are currently in the spotlight. And so you can see what kind of percentage of our portfolio goes into quantum tech, telecoms, AI, semiconductors. And we also support BBSRC in the engineering biology field as well. But what's it all for? It's all for that innovation and growth, and we make a contribution to that. You can see that we have a number of active spin-outs that we've supported through our funding. A lot of that, I think, being pulled through our impact acceleration accounts. So it's really good to see that. They've got a current annual turnover around 8 billion, as well as the number of jobs are created. So a very active ecosystem, of which we are sort of really keen that we kind of promote as part of what we do. So in terms of a growing commitment to place, this is a bit of a timeline about how EPSRC has been developing our footprint. So just before this starts, in 2019, I set up our first regional engagement managers, of which Natalie Jones, who will be here tomorrow, looks after the northwest area. And I think that was, I thought it was important, but I probably didn't think about the impact it would have in its broader sense, because you kind of think, well, this is what I think should happen, and actually how it's evolved has been really helpful. But it was before, I think, government white papers were around levelling up and devolution. I think we just sensed that there was a real need to have a greater connectivity with the regions that were outside Swindon. And even on a good day, if you kind of send staff around institutions and areas, you wouldn't get around each institution more than once a year, in terms of the resources that we have. So actually placing people in the region that are located, that can kind of touch base with institutions, civic leaders and business partners on a more regular basis just seemed like the logical, sensible thing to do. And I think the intel and the benefit of that is a testament to why we have developed the place-based impact acceleration accounts. But on the way, we had a discussion with our council about actually how can we orientate some of the work that we do that's more place-focused. So we created a framework about how we might approach that in around 2020. We then had the UKRI corporate plan that Aline sort of implemented in 2022, which finishes in 2027. I'm sure that'll be updated with a new chief executive starting later this year. But place was in the corporate plan objectives for the very first time. A part of the objectives and how we decided we would spend our money, we kind of committed to investing in place-based impact acceleration accounts, I think 30 million at the time. And we've now had 2 rounds of that. And then you come through to present day, and as Aline's already kind of trailblazed at the weekend, was the latest announcement from government on the LIPS, the Local Innovation Partnership Fund. So really quite a journey, and in some respects quite rapid if you think about sort of that 5-year time frame about what we are doing as an organisation. So why does place matter? Well, ideas and innovation are not exclusive to one particular area, and I think part of our framework is really how do we bring up everybody to a level playing field? So this isn't about prioritising disadvantaged areas in a way that's unhelpful. It's actually saying it's a competitive world out there. We want Manchester, Liverpool, these regions to be competing on merit, and because they have the best opportunities and they have the opportunities to grow as appropriate in their local economies. So I think the whole raison d'etre is about how do we kind of communicate, how do we make the opportunities more open to our communities, how we give people confidence that actually they should be competing in these spaces, because some of the areas around the UK, they don't do so well, but they don't apply to us. They put in smaller bids. They don't put in the kind of key leaders that we think should be there. So it's been very much through encouragement that we have been working with our communities. So it's about changing that culture to have that greater impact. It's thinking about how you kind of build on strengths. Now, some of you will remember, the science innovation audits and created a lot of paperwork, I seem to remember. But I think that just kind of was the first kind of call to arms about, well, what's really important to a particular area or region that actually we can try to think about aligning the research capabilities and what kind of skills are needed in our portfolio. And it's all got to be about growth, and that's the current mantra of the current administration. So it's important that we think about that when we're putting our propositions together.
So EPSRC supports growth in a number of different ways, and I've tried to kind of outline on this grant, and some of you might say, well, what's the relevance to this kind of thing? But I'm just really trying to show that you've got your standard responsive mode where a lot of those partners and a lot of those grants are distributed all around the UK, and there's an opportunity for everybody who has one of those grants to think about place when they are doing their work, when they are thinking about why is my research important, who am I talking to, where's the likely beneficiary of my research grant going to be. There's a real open opportunity to think about place right from the very beginning. So that's kind of the open mode, where then we have our managed mode like Prosperity Partnerships, which are very much our kind of flagship program where they're co-created with our industry partners. They are, I think, a really good exemplar about what you can do in regions, because you have I think I'll mention it in a bit, but you like Unilever and in Liverpool, just the kind of opportunity they have to kind of bring that kind of funding and that vision to the expertise that exists in the region. I talked earlier about a lot of the training that we support through our PhD program. So again, there's lots of opportunity with universities to invest in people that are relevant to the areas where they're located, through to the focal awards. I have to get the right word, CDT's code for the doctoral focal awards, where we actually have invested and thought about their placement in regions when we made the last set of announcements in 2024. And that's a really kind of salient point, because I remember in 2013, I think it was, when we had one of our CDT competitions. It was a really fair and tough competition. We funded loads of good proposals, and I don't think anybody would ever question the CDTs that we supported. But then when you take a step back and you realise there were some key industrial sector areas that hadn't secured a CDT, it just makes you scratch your head to think, why did that not happen? And it's, could we have done the process differently? Probably. Did we make the right decisions? Definitely, I think we did. But I think it's how do you learn from that? How do you then work with perhaps that missed opportunity to then fill that gap and actually make it stronger as a result? And I think that's something that, very much, I think, as we go forward, we need to be better at doing. And then lastly, the impact acceleration accounts, I think, again, highly valued, I think, by our many university partners in terms of what they can do. Never enough money in them to do all the things that people want to do. And I think that gave us the seed to think, actually, could we orientate some of this around particular clusters and think a lot more about how we can have greater impact in the region. So certainly that's what we did there. So I've mentioned Prosperity Partnership Flagship Scheme, and there are 5, I think, in this region, and they're hugely grateful for the support that we have with the range of companies that get involved in that. So why the place-based impact acceleration accounts? Well, I think I just needed to double check this list with what Aline presented in terms of what you hope to achieve with IBIC, but it's really again, we thought about how best to construct it and what would make a difference. What are the kind of elements that were important in making this a successful program? So that kind of relationship development, I think, is key. And we talked at dinner last night about actually how some parts, I think, of IBIC were talking to people you perhaps wouldn't naturally have spoken to. I think that kind of encouragement to think a little bit differently through the PBIAs. Again, it's still that early stage support to really kind of bring through those research outputs. How can we improve our public engagement? I think one of the challenges as UKRI is strengthening our narrative of where our investments go. The public will see a very large number going into science, research and innovation, and want to know why. I think our comms people were talking to us about, the appreciation of science innovation is quite low at the moment for quite a tech-savvy young generation. So we need to really think about why and how people understand the role that we play. And I think the key thing for us, it's got to work in the local ecosystem. This shouldn't be an imposition to say, here's some money, go and do something from scratch. It's about how do you build on the strengths that already exist. So we've got a good family of PBIAs in the Northwest. You can see the 3 other PBIAs listed here, and of course we've got IBIC, which makes the 4th, and that's led to an investment of £17.5 million by EPSRC in this region. And I think we've exceeded what we originally set out to do. So I think we planned to do about 30 million, and we've already invested 40 million in PBIAs as a consequence of the high quality bids that we've received. So as I come into land at the end of our talk, just really some final remarks. Agility is kind of a bit of a watchword. How do we pivot what we do in a way that's timely? I've been in the research council system for too many years, but that kind of cycle of change and that kind of adaptability is always getting kind of faster and faster and faster, particularly in a global competitive world. So actually how we can be more agile and really seize opportunities more quickly, I think is a real important sort of feature. And I think that's something that can be a strength of working closely with your regional partners. I think this has been probably the first time EPSRC has closely engaged with Civic partners. Now, this is from an English perspective. We do work as well with our devolved administrations in the countries around the UK. But I think this was kind of a new departure for us, and I think it's been a real eye-opener about the questions that they have that we think we can put to our scientific community, which I think is what keeps the buzz alive in the research domain that we have. Reflection, I know I'm in a friendly audience, hopefully, in as much that we funded IBIC, but there's a real sense from talking to the community, and we had a workshop in Edinburgh earlier this year where we got all the PBIAs together to think about how can we demonstrate and understand this is a successful model, because this is a pilot and we've done 2 rounds. My gut tells me that we want to do more, but I think in terms of a highly competitive world, we need to actually understand why it has value and what it's different to what we can do elsewhere. But I get a real sense that we've done something quite different and something that was quite receptive and well received by our communities. And maybe that's because we did quite a lot of consultation in developing the scope, but certainly it seems to have landed well. And I think it's that UK-wide community dedicated to place-based impact. So we know we've got excellent collaborations between some institutions that sit outside clusters that are developing impact within the cluster. So look forward to seeing what else gets discussed over the next 2 days. I'm sorry I have to leave at lunchtime today, but with other calls. But I know Natalie will be here tomorrow and will feed back to me about what else is going on. So let us be our own orchestra of success as we take this forward. But thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Anyone got one quick question?
There?
Oh, sorry.
It was a great talk, and I've got a question. You mentioned that you supported PPSRC to fund that engineering biology hubs and award about 2 years ago. Don't you think that EPSRC could have something a bit more specific, maybe later on in the TRL, to support the scaling up of that research that is done in engineering biology, because that seems to be a barrier for innovators to get to the commercialization of their product.
Really good. Question back. I think one of the visions of UKRI is to kind of have a more connected system with that translation pathway. We're doing currently a study with DCIT who are looking at different parts of the TRL systems and actually how joined up. And they didn't speak to EPSRC in the first instance because they didn't think we did anything above TRL levels, technology readiness levels, in case anybody's interested, above 1 to 3. But we do. And I think it's interesting about how we can lean into that and actually be really supportive, but recognise perhaps that funding needs to come more from other parts of UK research and innovation, what the role of partners will be. So the announcement at the weekend, has really got quite challenging targets of a 3-to-1 contribution from the private sector into that kind of local innovation productivity fund. So I think it's like how we kind of bring that together. And I think Aline would highlight, part of our role in those later stages is actually how well we can convene different partners. But I think I'm passionate, once we've funded something, and perhaps one of my benefits of hindsight, having been with UKRI for a number of years, is actually I'm starting to see some of the great impacts of science that we funded sort of 20 odd years ago, and it's like how we can build on that going forward. But certainly a key area that we need to work with, and we're working very closely with Innovate UK to think about how we can do that better. So, good question. Yeah. Anyway, please come and chat to me over coffee and stuff like that. It'd be great to meet you.
Brilliant.
Okay,
Thank you very much, Andrew. I've stood up here and talked about IBIC, but IBIC is a real team effort in terms of sort of academic support and leadership. So we have Femi from Liverpool John Moores, we have Claire and Andrew from the University of Liverpool, we have Natalie and Ali from Salford, and Ed from Manchester Metropolitan. And of course from Manchester we've got Neil, who's over there, and James Winterburn as well. So James is now going to come and talk to you about how to transition some academic research into a commercial entity. And I think his spin-out company, Holiferm, is a real trailblazer for our region, and James is a real exemplar of how to do it and keep it in the Northwest. So I won't say any more. James, over to you.
Wow, quite the introduction. I feel I can only disappoint you all now. The good news is I'm only giving half the talk. My colleague Joana, who's all the way over the other side there, is going to give the second half of the talk. And really, there's a few things I want to focus on today. So from what Aline just said in a very kind introduction to Richard Jones mentioning Holiferm earlier, we're but one example of what you can do within the Northwest around innovation, commercialisation and translation of the really great ideas we have in our universities. So I wanted to get that in before I forget later on. So really just giving you an illustrative example. I'm going to talk relatively briefly, maybe for slightly less than half of the time, he says, because a lot of you have heard me speak before about this kind of initial kind of path and early stage translation of Holiferm out of the university. That's what I'm going to focus on and talk about scale up from a very kind of technical perspective. So, how do we make things bigger, go from a little separator or bioreactor to something much larger? And I'll show you some pictures of that as well, just so we can kind of calibrate what we might mean by scale up in this industrial biotechnology type setting. And then Joanna's going to talk about something that, as I've kind of gone through this kind of journey of learning about how to do things commercially, the commercial scale up of your business. Which I am very much naive to, and as I've learned, is really the key part of this. It's not just being able to scale up your technology and produce. It's really, I guess, the selling challenge. How do you commercially scale your business as well? So really looking forward to what Joanna's got to say about that as well. So just to kind of set the scene a little bit about what we do as Holiferm, we manufacture biosurfactants. So these are microbially produced from fermentation using renewable resources, so like a sugar and a vegetable oil, and we produce these biosurfactants as biodegradable alternatives to petrochemical derived surfactants, and we can use these in a range of use cases, so personal care, household care, laundry care, things where you need cleaning action, basically. Okay? And to give a little bit more detail of where we started out, so I'm one of the co-founders of Holiferm. My other co-founder is Ben Dolman, who's been CEO of Holiferm throughout our journey until very recently. We just brought in a new CEO, someone called Charlie Dimler, for kind of the next stage of our strategic transition and growth, and Ben is now Chief Innovation Officer. So we make sophrolipid biosurfactants. So for those of you who are interested, there's a little spinny molecule of a particular form of a sophrolipid. These are produced by yeast, so Starmorella bombicola, that were originally isolated from a honeybee hive, so that's why there's a picture of a bee there, and there's a little story there. And if any of you ever saw Ecover products that were powered by bees, That's where that little bee narrative and little story actually came from. So Ben and I early on, so Ben was actually my first PhD student. My background for my PhD was kind of biochemical engineering and biosurfactant production as well. So I kind of thought we'll play it safe and stick with something that looks like it, you know, we can get to work. So for some vaguely scientifically valid reasons, we chose sophrolipids. And this little centrifuge tube that you can see on the right there gives you an idea of some of the complex phase behavior you've got. So this has been spun down, but you've basically got an oil layer from the feedstock, an aqueous phase, a cell pellet, and some sophrolipid. The point being you get this separate sophrolipid phase. So we developed a technology that we call kind of now integrated gravity separation. So the thing in the middle here, and that really enables us to, one, recover our biosurfactant as we're making it, and then allows us to do essentially what is some pretty, in some senses, standard chemical engineering process intensification approaches, but apply those to a fermentation process. And what that then gives us is high productivity at a decent yield, but it's that high productivity when you put it into your techno-economic analysis and your models that allow us to produce at a rate that makes these biosurfactants cost competitive with a petrochemical surfactant. We're in kind of that high volume, relatively low value kind of space of market here. So a little bit about what our technology does just in terms of overall process, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about how we got there and finish up with a point where, before I hand off to Joana, about something that's already been a theme of this morning, and that is partnerships, okay? And collaboration as a way of getting things done effectively. So this is what our process looks like. So we take our raw materials, we ferment using this yeast, we produce our biosurfactants, they go through this integrated gravity separator, and then through some pretty simple, straightforward downstream, essentially some washing steps, and then we can sell to kind of the companies that manufacture formulated products. So one very good example of commercial success of a different biosurfactant, rhamnolipids, so the same kind of biosurfactant family as the sophrolipids I'm talking about. Evonik produced rhamnolipids for Unilever in a very big commercial deal that they have for hand dishwash applications. So we're not the only one doing these things, and that's actually really great, because when you're trying to bring new molecules to market, finding who your early adopters are and getting that confidence is really important. So there's a lot of space in this market, I would argue. So kind of how did we get from Ben and I with an idea in a lab to a business now that in some senses is quite a nice example, perhaps coincidentally, perhaps with some thought in it, of kind of northwest kind of business spanning Trafford Park in Manchester, where we do R&D and we have our laboratories and some office function, to our commercial demonstration manufacturing facility that's over in Wallasey, so just over the water basically. And that's where from Wallasey to the world little line comes from that we'll talk about Joana will talk about in a second. The caveat here is when you present these things, it's a little bit rose-tinted and perhaps post-rationalised as well. So how did Ben and I go about kind of going from this little separator to actually getting to doing a seed raise and then a Series A and a Series B? So this timeline kind of gives you a little overview. I'm just going to pick a couple of things out that I think were key, focusing on the very early stage. So it's great, you've got this idea, you've got this technology. One of the things that Ben was really good at actually was getting out there. So he literally went on tour. So we went through the iCure program and he went on tour. He had one of these little separators or a little collection of them, literally in a little scruffy rucksack, and he went around the world trialing this technology in different places. So did some work over in India, in Japan, and really what we'd call kind of validating that technology, improving, demonstrating through collecting some robust data that it doesn't just work in our lab, in the University of Manchester, you can take this out and go about and start kind of building some key kind of industrial relationships and showing that the technology works in different places, as well as doing some initial scale up as well. So that's all I'm going to focus on. There's a lot more to the story than that, and I'm happy to talk later. In the last kind of couple of minutes that I've got, I want to talk about, well, the technical side of scale up, which is what I said I was going to focus on. So there's lots of different ways of doing things, and I think the question that we just had down here around how we scale up and things to do with TRLs is really important for lots of reasons. not least that this was 2020. One of the things that we ended up doing was creating our own pilot that for Holiferm as a biosurfactant manufacturer actually worked out to be a really great thing because we've now got this pilot facility that we can exploit. That used to be in Daresbury when we were at Scitech and is now over on the Wirral with our commercial demonstration manufacturing plant as well. What this gave us, though, was a real ability to do now, we can kind of do internal knowledge exchange and scale up for lots of different projects, but it really allowed us to learn and understand our process in a way that perhaps we wouldn't have been able to do if we'd gone through other routes. So to kind of round out what I wanted to talk about, we talk about scale a lot, so these are the pictures I was going to show you. Not going to say anything particularly detailed in terms of engineering or science here, just to say over Wallasey, Birken Headway at Ocean Park, we have a very large facility. So a big warehouse, 90,000 square feet, great. What's inside there is what's important. And really, when we talk about scale up, there's a lot to it. I always think about how can we engineer the fermentation, the bioreactor, how do we control the separator? But there's a lot more kind of fundamental challenges of how do you get your vessels fabricated at a capex that actually makes things viable based on your fundraise, just to pick one example. How do you lift it into place? You know, there's people who know how to do these things, but by definition, when you're a small and then rapidly growing company, everything you're doing for the first time as a business, and some of those things no one else has ever done before, especially in terms of scale of manufacturing of sophrolipids. So this is what our commercial demonstration facility looks like. So 1.6 kiloton annual capacity fermentation facility. And you saw a photo very much like this from Richard before. So we actually went on a nice tour around a week last Friday, to have a look at the facility with my research group and some collaborators. And I think that perspective is really important in terms of seeing what we mean when we're talking about scaling engineering biology and the challenges that encompasses as well. I'm now eating into your time, Joana, so I'm going to stop there. My final point was that, you know, as IBIC, we've got this great opportunity to form kind of a community, to have partnerships and networks, and this is a non-exhaustive list of the people that we've been involved with and continue to be as Holiferm. So I'll pause there and hand over to Joana, and I've stolen 30 seconds from you. Sorry.
Okay. So next one. We've created this technology, we were able to scale it, but the next challenge is actually bringing it to the market. And we're going from, we developed this idea in the lab, to you can go to a supermarket and buy products that have the biosurfactants that we made in our production plant. So when we are approaching the market wants three things. They want products that are sustainable, that have better performance than what they already have, and that are cheaper. And I think this is great, but the world doesn't work that way. With the biosurfactants, we are definitely in that sustainable alternative space. So we know that these products have a lower carbon footprint, are produced in a more sustainable way. The next challenge is working on performance and price. And when it comes to price, this is where Holiferm really innovated, and this is where we have our right to succeed. At our core, we are a bioprocess engineering company. We were able to create this process that is decreasing the price and allowing us to scale these products and bring them to the market, the mass market, at the price that it's now feasible for companies to look into this. So, for example, James mentioned that we are already at 1,600 tons a year capacity. We increased 50% of our capacity just on process innovation after we opened our commercial plant. So with industrial biotechnology, and I'm on that field by training, now moved a little bit into commercial, but I think there's a massive potential for this industry to actually solve a lot of the problems in terms of sustainability that we have, but we need to be able to bring these technologies to scale, and there needs to be investment for us to be able to do that. So with the biosurfactants, what we have, it's a molecule that is more sustainable, has great other benefits, and we are the first biosurfactant company in the UK and the second in the world. So how are we approaching the market? One of the first challenges is that this molecule is not a drop-in molecule. So when I approach the market, I'm not coming in with a solution that is exactly the same that they are using, so they just need to switch suppliers. So it's a new molecule. It requires reformulation. So that's my first challenge, is to help my customers reformulate with these molecules. Another thing that is quite important right now and is actually helping drive some of these solutions to market are compliance and regulatory benefits. We are seeing across multiple industries that not only the market is demanding more sustainable solutions, but also regulatory compliance like Prop 65 in California and 1.4 dioxin regulations in the US are driving customers to look for alternatives. So this is my first opportunity. They are already looking for something new. It's our chance to deliver on that. Some market trends that we can leverage. So some of these are in personal care. People are looking for cleansing capacity, but that are milder to the skin, not only general like shampoos, facial cleanses, but also for sensitive skin like baby care. And the general sustainable beauty is still very much a big trend in the market. So if you look, for example, glycolipids is the name of the biosurfactants as an ingredient when they go into personal care formulation. So if you go home, look at your facial cleanser and there's glycolipids in there, that's biosurfactants. We also see in home care, as James mentioned, companies already moving into this biosurfactant space, looking for raw materials that are more sustainable, but also gentle to your clothes, less damaging to fabrics, less damaging to surfaces. Based on this, we really decided to focus in two main areas as we approach the market, so mostly home care and personal care, and a little bit in agriculture. So then our next step is really working on performance. So we know we have the sustainability, the price we're very much working on. The second is to focus on showing the performance of these products. And what our team has been really successful in doing is really finding those applications where we're actually able to have a cost performance benefit. Another thing is to look at these molecules as multifunctional ingredients, because with petrochemicals and chemical molecules, you can synthesize a molecule that has an extreme performance at a certain application. In biology, you often have molecules that are more multifunctional and will be able to give you different performance with the same molecule. So in home care, we have excellent degreasing performance and very low impact on surfaces. So if you're looking for hard surface cleaning, working with biosurfactants is actually a great alternative. In personal care, we have great conditioning and detergency. So I saw that some example of innovation was this 2-in-1 shampoo conditioner. You can do that with biosurfactants because we're able to do both. And also in agriculture, now with the move to more organic regulations, this could be an excellent alternative. And this is how we get from Wallasey to the world. In green are all the geographies where we have commercial activity. So it was a challenge for us to decide how are we approaching the market. We are still a startup scale-up, so we opted to have a quite lean commercial approach to the market. When it comes to the UK, this is really our home turf, so we decided to go direct sales. We already have a lot of contacts. And when it comes to the rest of the world, we opted to engage partners, distribution partners that we work with, and then are bringing our product, our brand name to the market. We still have salespeople from Denver to Melbourne, which makes time zones and getting meetings arranged quite tricky. But the key here is also looking for those partners that are wanting to bring innovation into the market and they have the right connections to put your product there. So right now you can buy a shampoo in France when you go into Sephora, play golf in the US on grass that was watered with biosurfactants, or even we now started some new projects in Asia because biosurfactants also decrease mortality in chickens, for example, and make the breasts juicier. So In our approach to market, we have two ways of doing that, what we call the push and the pull. With the push, we are very much focused on those areas of application. We are developing data to understand where our product really performs, and then we push that into the market. At the same time, we have pulled sometimes for areas that we never really thought that biosurfactants could play a part or even have a benefit, that we have companies from all over the world that come to us that are interested in collaborating, because bringing biosurfactants to market, it is all about innovation. There are a lot of innovative companies that have looked into these molecules in the past, were not able to work with them because the price was quite prohibitive. And now, as we are able to scale and bring these technologies to market, they are able to reignite some of these projects, and we are learning all together as an industry what these molecules can do. And then I wanted to bring you some examples because this has been from the lab to actually the market. So one of the examples, and I focused on UK-based companies. A lot of the companies that we work with I'm not allowed to talk about, but I chose some examples here in the UK. So one of them is Andu. Andu is a very small company. It's a mom and daughter company. They make solid shampoo bars, but they were actually very important in our journey. They were one of our first customers, still when we were at pilot scale, and they allow us to actually make that proof of concept of the product in the market. Another one is PVA Hygiene, and they actually just launched a product which is a powder that you can dilute and make a hard surface cleaner. And this actually potentiated us to launch a new product in the market. They wanted the biosurfactants in solid form. We had already worked in that, but this was one of the projects that actually kicked that product and put it out there in the market. And now we're selling these solid surfactants in Europe already. And another example is Cozy Cottage, is a company that is very much focused on sustainability and products that are good for the planet. And they also launched a surface cleaning spray with us, and more to come in the future. So if you follow our social media, we've been doing some quite nice things with them. And again, this is just some examples how the innovation that we started here in the UK and now are bringing into the world is also helping other UK companies to innovate and differentiate themselves in the market. And that's all in terms of time, but I'm available for questions either now or after the presentation.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, James and Joana, for a great introduction to a really growing and hopefully thriving company. And yeah, I'm going to look up those companies about the cleaning products for home. I'm very conscious of time, so I'm going to encourage everyone to ask questions over the break. And I'm just going to leave you before we go across the corridor for coffee with one kind of thought that I took off the EPSRC's website last night, actually, that companies that win a R&D grant in collaboration with academia, they tend to grow 20% in terms of job creation and turnover over the coming few years. So with that thought in mind, I encourage you to go network over coffee. Please talk to the exhibitors on your way out, and we'll reconvene at 10:02. So we'll take 20 minutes for coffee and we'll make up the time over lunch. Okay, thank you very much. And to all the speakers this morning.